The original Outlast was one of the most iconic survival horror games ever made when it first released. It was one of the first horror games that completely denied the player any adequate way of defending themselves. When an enemy spotted you in Outlast, you either ran or you died. Your only ally in this world was your video camera, a tool that allowed players to see in the dark, for better or for worse. Throughout the entire game, you are constantly being pursued by some of the most creative and horrifying characters in all of video gaming. Characters like the insane Dr. Traeger,
Chase here, buddy.
Chris Walker,
Little pig.
and of course, the Penis Brothers. Combine all this with the suffocating atmosphere of the game's setting, Mount Massive Asylum, and you had a recipe for one of the most unforgettable horror games ever made. I usually never have any issue completing horror games, since it takes a lot to scare me, but I honestly thought about quitting Outlast several times. It scared me that much. Things started out okay. I arrived at the asylum, I climbed through an open window, some obligatory jump scares happened, and honestly I was finding the whole experience rather boring. I had played this kind of game a million times before, but then the basement happened. Oh sweet Christ, the basement. So early on in the game, the power is cut to the asylum, and the only way to restore it is by going down into the basement and flicking some levers to restore power to the area. And this is where the game really begins. The basement is almost pitch black. Even with your night vision camera, it's difficult to make anything out. So you're basically feeling around in the dark for something to interact with. And then you hear him. Your first real encounter with one of these monsters. The only problem is, you can't see him, and it's almost impossible to make out exactly where he is through his footsteps. So you move gently through the basement until you find a button. You push it, and suddenly you hear your would-be pursuer rushing towards the room you're currently in to check what all that noise was about. You panic and desperately begin looking for somewhere to hide. Mercifully, you find a bed and hide underneath it. The man enters the room. You hold your breath and pray he doesn't look under the bed. A few moments pass and the man leaves. You let out a sigh of relief, until you come to the horrifying realization that you still need to pull 2 more levers, and he's still out there somewhere, waiting for you. It is one of the most expertly crafted horror moments in a video game, and it absolutely terrified me, to the point where I was almost ready to throw in the towel at such an early point in the game. And Outlast is full of moments like this. It's an absolute roller coaster ride that is up there as one of my favourite horror games of all time. A year later, we also got the excellent DLC episode Whistleblower, which was arguably just as good as the main game itself. However, I want to talk about that expansion in its own separate video. So after an amazing first game and an impressive piece of downloadable content, Outlast was quickly distinguishing itself as the new king of survival horror. Where could developer Red Barrels possibly take the franchise next? Well, nowhere good as it turns out. Outlast 2 was released in 2017 and was met with rather mixed reviews. A lot of reviewers praised its world, story and horror, but just as many critics found the game boring, unfairly difficult and needlessly graphic. I actually really enjoyed the game the first time I played it. However, I played the game a few years after it released on the Nintendo Switch, so I was already pretty much expecting a train wreck from the few reviews I had read. However, I was pleasantly surprised. The game was still scary, the story was intriguing, and overall I had fun with it. It wasn't until my second and third playthroughs, however, that I really started to dislike this game. First off, I should start by saying that contrary to what the title of this video says, I don't think Outlast 2 is a terrible game. Not in the literal sense anyways. It's more a terrible game because of all the potential it squanders. There is a great game hidden somewhere, but it's buried beneath hours upon hours of unfair deaths, boring sections where all you do is walk for minutes at a time, a confusing, disjointed mess of a story, and of course, this part where you row a raft down a river for nearly 20 minutes and nothing happens. It feels like Red Barrels wanted to go bigger and better for the sequel, but they didn't quite know how to do it. They added a few mechanics like being able to heal yourself with bandages, which feels like a pointless inclusion, because every time you die, you respawn a few seconds back with all your health restored anyways. You can hide in barrels now, but it serves the same purpose as hiding in a locker or under a bed, so I wouldn't call it a meaningful upgrade. The final new feature is the addition of a directional mic on your camera, which allows you to get a better idea of where your enemies are. But this feature straight up ruins a lot of the tension the previous games offered. I mean, it's a necessary inclusion in this game, especially for moments like in the cornfield, where enemies are surrounding you, and you need help pinpointing where they are. But you'll also never be afraid of moving forward in this game, because you'll always know when you're safe and when you aren't. The enemies you encounter are also nowhere near as interesting as those found in the first game. They don't talk to you for the most part. They don't have interesting backstories. They're nothing, basically. The first dangerous character you meet in this game is called Marta. And you know how I was praising the first game for how well it set up its first confrontation? Yeah, well, this is how Marta appears in the game. She just appears. The first time this happened, I thought it was a cutscene or something, but no, she killed me. And I assume she'll kill most players when they play this section for the first time. That's how badly the game handles enemy encounters. Marta is given no build-up. She appears and that's it. In fact, that's all she ever does. She appears out of nowhere, sticks her axe up your ass, and then fucks off again. She is a boring villain. But Marta is nothing compared to these two dipshits. I can't remember their names, and honestly, I couldn't be arsed looking them up. They mean that little to me. Anyways, these two kidnap you multiple times, and every time it's like, is that it? They kidnap you and nail you to a cross, which you then escape from 5 seconds later. They then kidnap you again and bury you in a coffin under an inch of dirt, which you then escape from 5 seconds later. These guys would make the worst kidnappers ever, and pretty much every villain in the game is just as unmemorable and idiotic as these two. But now it's time to talk about the story, because this is where most of my issues with Outlast 2 lie. Outlast 2 follows the harrowing story of journalist Blake Langerman. At the beginning of the game, Blake is flying over what is believed to be a deserted wasteland in the middle of the Arizona desert. His wife Lynn decides to join him, since they both seem interested in investigating the apparent murder of a pregnant woman in the area. However, things quickly go to shit when their plane crash lands in the area. Blake awakens to find that the pilot has been brutally murdered, and Lynn is nowhere to be found, so he sets off to search for her. Shortly afterwards, he stumbles upon what appears to be an abandoned village, although it's clearly not abandoned, because it would be a pretty shitty horror game if it was, wouldn't it? Blake meets all kinds of people in this place, some friendly, most deadly. Eventually, Blake finds the church where Lynn has been taken. The two of them escape, and to quote Einstein, this is where shit gets fucked. We find out that Lynn is actually pregnant, but that's not all. She's also really pretty. But she is also pregnant with the Antichrist, and that's really bad. The leader of this cult, A man named Sullivan Knott believes Lynn's child needs to be murdered before it brings about the apocalypse. It's all a lot of family-friendly fun. Anyways, Lynn gets kidnapped again, and so Blake needs to set off once more to find her, before the villagers murder her and her baby. Along the way, he discovers more about the villagers and the mysterious cult they seem to be a part of. Most of the game's lore is told to you through text documents, however. Speaking of which, there is so much frickin' reading in this game, and it's all bullshit. Okay, I need to talk spoilers from here on out, so if you haven't played this game yet, stop the video now. While I personally don't like the game, I would still recommend everyone at least try it when it goes on sale, because it's a very interesting game. Okay? Okay. So throughout the game, you find various pieces of paper strewn around the world. Sometimes these might be a diary, a poem, or a suicide note. Most of the time, however, they're chapters from what appears to be the Bible that these people have created. And I swear to God, these documents feature some of the most childish, cringeworthy writing I have ever seen from a video game. It's like they hired a few 13-year-olds to write this shit. Chapter 11. Now the breaching of hell's cunt drew nigh, and the night air sang with the grinding edges of the midwife's blades. Chapter 13. And by these signs shalt thou know of the nearing breach of hell's cunt. Chapter 15. Be ye filthy, be ye just, be ye unjust, be ye clothed in shame or in glory. In time God shall fuck ye with it, and so shall be thy reward. And you know what the worst part about having to read chapter upon chapter of this nonsense is? It means literally nothing. The Murkoff Corporation is driving everyone insane using these speakers littered about the place. They were installed as part of some mind control experiment. In case you don't know, the Murkoff Corporation owned Mount Massive Asylum, and it's practically the only bit of information that links Outlast 2 with the first game. Speaking of these mind control devices, they can also cause hallucinations in people, and this, my friends, leads me to my biggest issue with Outlast 2. The mother frickin' school sections. So occasionally, Blake will begin to hallucinate, and when he does, he is transported back to the school he used to study at. Initially, the school seems completely abandoned. As you explore further and further, however, things begin to take a sinister turn. You're haunted by images of your childhood friend, Jessica, hanging herself. Also, this pink cunt decides to start stalking you throughout the school. Let me make one thing clear. The school sections of Outlast 2 are the worst part of the game. You spend hours in this place, and 99% of that time is spent walking through the same old halls over and over again, doing nothing. It sucks. And why are you here? What's the big reveal at the end of the story that makes the hours spent plodding through these halls worth it? Well, it turns out Blake had a friend called Jessica. You find out that the school's priest, Father Lautermitz, was molesting Jessica. The priest murders Jessica so no one will find out he was molesting her, and then paints it as a suicide. That's it. It's not related in any way whatsoever to the main plot of the game. I'm guessing Red Barrels expected us all to be shocked at the very idea of a priest molesting a child. Oh my God, whoever could have imagined a priest doing such a thing? Look, I'm sorry about the sarcasm, but I'm Irish, okay? If the local priest wasn't fiddling you as a child, you were pretty much considered a freak of fucking nature. This school stuff didn't need to take up as much of the game as it does. It's boring, it's repetitive, and it doesn't even tell a particularly interesting story. It's filler, designed to pad the game out so that the developers could justify releasing another full game instead of just another expansion, like Whistleblower was. Anyways, going back to the main story, Blake eventually rescues Lynn. Well, actually, she kinda rescues herself. You take her to the chapel where this happens.
Ah! Oh shit! Shit! Oh!
You need to lie down.
I can't do this!
You can do this!
Oh God! Something's wrong.
Just keep breathing.
Feels like something's wrong. Ah! It hurts too much.
I know, baby, I know. But you can do this, okay? Just keep breathing.
Oh, fuck! Fuck! Ah! Oh, God! Oh, God!
Keep breathing.
It's
Just
killing
push.
me! Ah!
Lynn!
There's nothing there.
Oh, Jesus God! Lynn! 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 No! Lynn! No!
Notch shows up and is all like, "Is that the fucking Antichrist?" and then slices his own throat. You walk out with the baby and an explosion happens or something? I don't know. The story kinda sucks basically. I do understand what Red Barrels was going for. They wanted to show what religion can turn people into. They wanted to show that even the most religious of us can be monsters. But people have known that for years. The story doesn't tread any new ground, and furthermore, the way the story is executed is horrendous. Like I said, there's a good game in Outlast 2. It just needed to cut out all the shit. If Red Barrels had removed the school entirely, if they had tightened up the level design so there were less unfair deaths, and if they had removed this bullshit, I do believe Outlast 2 could have been a better game than even the first. There's still enough heart-pounding moments in this game to make any horror fan squeal with glee, and when it's at its best, you really see what this game could have been. Hi guys, I haven't officially announced it yet because I have feck all subscribers, but I do have a Patreon if any of you guys are interested in seeing more content like this. Unfortunately, I'm not able to monetize many of my reviews because of some stupid reasons, I don't know. I have been considering bleeping my swears, but fuck that. Regardless, I'd like to thank you for watching, and please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video. Thank you.